Welcome back. We last left off having attempted to beat Kirby in the Forgotten Land without jumping. If you want more details about that, then please watch the previous video, which should be linked in a card right now. For today, we're tackling the post-game. So, without further ado, is it possible to beat Kirby and the Forgotten Land's Forgo Dreams without jumping? You saw the last video, right? So you know the rules. We can't jump or hover. Now let's actually get into these levels. The first level is Forgo Plains, which sets up our expectations going forward pretty nicely. The levels we'll be facing here consist of remixes of parts of levels from the worlds in the main campaign. They are of course changed with respect to things like enemy placement, but are geographically for the most part the same. It's also worth noting that in each level there's about 50 pieces of Leongar's soul, give or take, to be collected. If we want to prevail, we need to beat 6 levels while picking up 250 of those lost soul fragments, all without jumping. And in many respects, that is the main meat of this post-game content. It really is the natural endpoint of Kirby and the Forgotten Land's design philosophy of linear exploration. I will be showing footage of each fragment I collect, and keep a counter going on screen as to how many we've gotten thus far, as well as specifically talk about any of the more difficult or otherwise interesting ones to get. Ultimately though, a lot of them are very easy to just grab as you progress through the level, basically completely normally. As for this first level, these nails here require temporarily switching out from sword to hammer, and then we come upon the hovering tutorial. The barrel we had used here previously has been replaced with a bench, which is still high enough for us to use it as a platform to allow Meta Knight's sword and the upper calibers to get us onto the roof and past the hovering tutorial jumpless. But then we're soon stopped by another daunting obstacle to scale. Back in the normal layout of this area, this platform moved up and down, allowing for easy access to the door. Unfortunately, in the Dream Realm, it's stuck in the down position. It's too high to surmount with upward slashes, but if you upward slash from here, then your upper calibers can just barely get you across, thus allowing us to continue through the level without having to resort to jumping. This soul piece near the boulders is easy to get so long as you use multiplayer, which will likely become a trend, like with this one. A major section of this level that was entirely new to me was this cone section, which was a bit more difficult than it otherwise would have been for us, since some of the platforms would have been broken had we used our jumper placement to land on them. Luckily, you can navigate around pretty simply. And the level ends with a Phantom Gorimondo fight, which Noble Ranger is pretty good for. So, exiting our first level, we have 0 jumps and 42 pieces of Leon's soul collected. On to the next one. The opening screen of Forgo Bay includes many soul fragments that are trivial to get with Tornado. This one, however, you can't quite reach with Tornado's height. But that really isn't much of an issue, because you can solve that problem by getting Sword from the mini-boss in this area, which then allows you to get the height required to get the soul fragment. In the next section, there are quite a few soul fragments that you need to use Ranger to get. Luckily, we can switch between Sword and Ranger fairly well. You just need to make sure you don't accidentally lose Sword, because you do need to have Sword to get out of the water to move on to the next area. After that is a section all about flowing water, in which you'd better hope you don't get hit and lose your sword. Putting my own personal dislike for this sort of area aside, though, you can certainly make your way through it and get some soul fragments even, no problem. Then for this windy section, you don't even need to actually have a good jumper placement on your copy ability to get through it. And there's even a sword waiting for you at the end. So, hooray for that. Phantom Tropic Wood then would have been easier had I chosen to face him with a drill, but certainly still can be taken out by sword. And that's level 2 conquered with 0 jumps, and an additional 37 soul fragments, bringing our total to 79. Forgo Park is then much easier than the previous level. We end up going through it with sword, and the only instance of particular difficulty is the light bulb section, which gave us some trouble in the main campaign. But we can get past it the same way we did last time. Ultimately, Forgo Park costs us 0 jumps, and allows us to snag 46 soul fragments, bringing our total to 125. Forgo Horns heavily encourages the use of drill in the early segments of it. That, in general, goes fairly well, Though when we come to this windy section, we do find it advantageous to switch to Needle to grab this soul fragment, and then to Dragonfire, since that's what's available here. This gap at first glance seems tough to get Cone through, until you realize that you can initiate a spike downwards from midair. Then this boat section had me quite frightened for a second given our history with boats. Until I realized it was ringless, that is. Or, at least it is, until it's not. We can get on the boat no problem, but as is typical, need to jump once to disembark. And unfortunately, I am quite certain that you do need to interface with the boat to progress. So that is jump number 1 of our challenge. And as a word of advice, don't use ice to fight Phantom King DDD. Ultimately, we depart Forgo Horns with 41 more soul fragments and 1 more jump. We have 166 soul fragments now. The early parts of Forgo Wasteland go by smoothly with the use of drill, even these mouthful sections at the mall. And then we reach this cliff face. Hitting this bomb block reveals some square stone platforms we can use to scale it. Unfortunately for us, those platforms are hard surfaces that drill can't excavate into. Well, back to the drawing board. Sword is not available in this level, so we have to bring it from outside and keep it the whole way through. It's not quite as immediately convenient as just using drill, but is more than capable of getting through the level, up until the cliffs, and even grabbing all the soul fragments we were able to get the first time around. Even if some of them, like this one, require dragging another copy ability across a whole desert. Still possible, though. Now as for the cliffs, Sword is able to stepping stone up those stone blocks, no problem, and in fact just sails through this section until these ladders, that is. Remember, the upward slash can only be done from the ground, so when transitioning between these ladders, we have no access to a jump replacement. And just launching yourself off the side of the ladder without a jump is a recipe for naught but falling into the abyss. Quite simply, Sword cannot clear this obstacle. But what else could we even try? Like, Sword is the only thing that's been able to get to this point, and the only thing we can swap it out with right here is Needle, which definitely isn't going to work. Well, I guess we could give Dragonfire a shot. I'll be honest, it doesn't go nearly as smoothly as it did with Sword, but Dragonfire can get through the first portion of the level and get to the cliffs. Once again, getting all of the same soul fragments we got before in the process. Then, as we attempt to scale the cliffs, we are faced with the fact that Dragonfire just simply isn't great at rising such heights with so little in the way of runway. Either you activate your jump replacement facing directly towards the cliff, and crash and burn before you get much of any height, or you face away from the cliff, getting some decent height, but ending up so far away that you can't really leverage it to your advantage at all. But there is a sweet spot. If you face the cliff at just the right angle, you don't crash into it, but rather rise up alongside it, which grants just enough height to reach the next block. From there, rinse and repeat. Although here you can actually skip the entire cliff, which I would highly recommend. Now we've finally reached the ladders, which, with Dragonfire, are a laughably trivial obstacle. But we're not out of the woods just yet. We need to see if Dragonfire is capable of getting us through the remainder of the level as well. We do end up encountering some more very annoyingly placed ladders, but the tactics we've been using thus far with Dragonfire prove sufficient to overcome them. Then we come upon this dark area, which honestly is practically built for fire. And ultimately, Phantom's Silly Dillo burns easily. We leave the wasteland having added 0 jumps to our total, and having obtained 44 more soul fragments. That puts us at 210 soul fragments going into Forgo Zone. We'll need to pick up 40 more here. We start the level by leveraging Tornado's traversal abilities to go through the level as well as grab a bunch of soul fragments, which would have otherwise been quite the challenge to obtain. Then, when given the opportunity, we switch to Dragonfire, which ends up facing this annoying ladder, which we had to get by with Dragonfire back in the main campaign. Luckily, it's still just as possible here. It's also great for this conveyor area, especially when paired with Bandana Waddle Dee, dealing with collecting things that are easier gotten with more fine control over your jump replacements. And finally, we do loads of combat in flat arenas, sometimes using mouthful abilities, and occasionally riding a roller coaster. We end up collecting 44 soul fragments from this level, and all without jumping. And finally, Forgo Land is a level comprised of just 3 boss fights, which Noble Ranger Kirby annihilates without even the temptation to jump. So, is it possible to beat Kirby and the Forgotten Lands Forgo Dreams without jumping? Technically, no. We did have that one disembark from the boat, which I do qualify as a jump, though your mileage may vary. But anyways guys, that's another challenge finished. If you enjoyed, please do check out one of my other numerous Kirby No Jump challenges on this channel, and of course subscribe and ring the bell so you can be first to see the challenge I attempt next. But anyways guys, until next time, I have been CMeeCraft, hoping to be effective and efficient as I attempt to bring you yet another challenge video. Goodbye.